It's great to see so many of you on tonight. I'm really looking forward to geeking out about Trumpet. It's one of my absolute favorite things to do. I have to admit, I was a little bit late in submitting my title and topic for this presentation, and Sarah so generously and fantastically did it for me. So we are absolutely going to be diving into tone and technique for sure. And in fact, that's probably going to be the bulk of this presentation. But we are going to get into some other things as well. And so we are we're going to get into the tone and technique, but it's going to be under a larger umbrella of what I'm going to call breaking down the creative process. The creative process being like, how do we practice? How do we learn music and achieve our goals, or even set our goals and decide what it is that we want to do most effectively and efficiently? So with that, the creative process, I think it's important to realize people tend to think of creatives as, I don't know, whimsical and like off the cuff and just like sort of floating by the seat of our pants and doing whatever we want. And the creative process, honestly, couldn't be further from the truth. It's very dry, it's very simple. I want to be clear, it's not easy, but it is simple, repetitive, monotonous, and it's basically focused dedication toward a much longer term gratification. And so, and also the progress is non-linear. So we've probably all hit roadblocks. We've probably all been frustrated more often than not. And it's important to realize that that's all part of the process. We're still learning, we're still growing, we're still evolving, we're still progressing whenever that happens. I think about key traits of success, or key traits for success with the creative process, and it's things like patience, perseverance, consistency, perhaps dissatisfaction, the ability to remain objective, and to learn from mistakes. And so, on the one hand, if you think about these traits that I just mentioned, and then you think about where our society is at in general, society is kind of trending in the opposite direction. However, if you think about it, I tend to choose to think positively. So if you flip the script a little bit, musicians who find success with their progress and their ability to move through the creative process effectively are uniquely positioned to thrive despite our society's increasing trend in the other direction. Society is always trying to steal our attention and uh, you know play towards our more instant gratification impulses.
There you
All right, we've got a wide mix of everybody, so I'm going to cast a wide net, and the nice thing is that the techniques don't change. And they don't change if I'm talking to a fifth grader that's just learning trumpet for the first time, or I'm teaching myself, somebody that's been playing, professionally for decades. The main fundamentals and the main techniques, the main core principles are the same. So we're gonna stick to that. Beautiful. Okay. So like I said, we're gonna title this "Breaking Down the Creative Process: A Guide to Establishing and Maintaining Effective Practice for Trumpet Players." I guess that's just the title page, so we can go ahead and roll on to the next slide. Thank you very much. All right, so here's a bit of an agenda. You see that number 2, that fundamentals in there. That is going to be the bulk of what we talk about. That's where our tone and our technique is in there. So, but I will talk a little bit about performance versus practice, and the way I kind of delineate in my mindset how I'm approaching what I do. The analytical side, and then what I like to call the storyteller side of things. And then there's that fundamentals again. So we'll get into all of the tone, the technique. I tend to think of it as 5 areas of technique: tone, flexibility, articulation, and expression. And then there's a couple other sort of sub levels. You'll notice I didn't say range in there. A lot of people ask about, how do I play higher? That's like a big trumpet player thing. And I don't even consider range like an area of technique. I will talk about why I feel that way. Um, and then improvisation is another thing that we can get into if we want to. I'm kind of putting that under the umbrella of the expressive category. But
Got it.
that'll be the I guess the bulk of the
Hey,
discussion
I mean,
today.
okay.
So we'll get into a little bit about setting goals,
Mm,
knowing your needs and how to manage your time to maximize impact in the practice room. And then I am a huge nerd and love to talk about biology and how our brains work and how our bodies learn and behavior patterns and things like that. And I wish, one of my wishes, if I could go back in a
mm.
time machine and teach my younger self things. Well, one of them for sure would be like use a metronome way more. But another one is I wish I discovered this passion for like the biological way that we learn. Um, because it just is. It's how it works. And we can choose to use that to our advantage when we're practicing and trying to become better trumpet players, or we could ignore it and just make it harder on ourselves. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A. So think of your Q's and hopefully I have some A's. Okay, so practicing versus performing. Um, Maybe we think of these two things separately, maybe we don't. But I think it's important to delineate these two things. And I want to be clear, performing does not just mean it's a concert day, I'm walking out on stage in my concert black. That's not the only time for performance. There are many times within a practice session here at my home when I'm in performance mode. And it really just has to do with what is the goal? What am I trying to accomplish or achieve at this very moment? So, what does that mean? What is practicing? At least as I see it. Like what am I trying to do? Here's kind of just a real basic breakdown of kind of the analytical practicing process. So, if I'm playing a piece of music, I'm trying to learn a new tune or a song or expand my technique with some exercise or something. Um, it starts with analysis and synthesizing like, well, what are the skills in here that I need to be able to work on to effectively perform this piece of music or this exercise or whatever. So whatever level you're at, just get comfortable and familiar. And the more experience you have, the easier this gets. But kind of breaking down what you're looking at and what are the difficult things about this passage, this piece, this song. And then okay, I see that this like and it's a great place to start is just sight read it, notice and observe and make note where you're struggling, where you're messing up. And so try to figure out, well, what is it about this? Is it because there's a large interval slur? Is it because there's a difficult, I keep getting tongue tied or something rhythmic that I don't understand? Start to make note of that. And then that's how you start to synthesize what are these individual skills that I need to practice to be able to perform this. All right, then you isolate each of those skills individually, work them slowly and with a metronome, and then contextualize the skill. Another way of saying that would be like, okay, start to put it back into the piece, but not totally. Okay, so maybe play. If you slowed something down, this is where maybe you start to click the metronome back up a little bit and incrementally start to speed it up. Or maybe you start to, if you're working on like two measures of a piece of music, maybe now you add the measure before it and the measure after it. Um, and then it's important to have an evaluation process. Like, did I get better at this? How much better did I get at this? And then adapt your next steps accordingly. So all of that is very objective. It's very analytical. It's very specific. It's very isolating. How much can I break this down and focus on this one very specific thing? Now, performing. There are times, again, like I said, that you want to perform in your practice session at home. It doesn't just mean a performance out in public. But what am I doing when I'm performing? I'm still in the practice room, okay, but now I'm working on just playing. I think late. I guess I didn't put it on this slide. I think I put it somewhere later. But it's the see the forest through the trees moment. You know, we were so focused on the granular when we're practicing and analyzing. Now we're just playing. My goal is not to stop for every mistake. My goal is to try to convey this emotion that I'm trying to convey, or tell the story that I'm trying to tell, and not get caught up in all the minutia that I was practicing. The basic idea here is practice the skills, and then that will give you the muscle memory and the habits to hopefully perform correctly. I don't like that word correctly. Perform well and passionately and convincingly, I guess, let's say. Cool. Tone. Tone is something that a lot of you indicated you want to work on. We got to work on our tone every day. But how do we do it? There's a lot of method books, exercises, ways of practicing tone. But first, it's important to understand that there is not just one trumpet tone that is correct, or even like for one person, or even for one piece. It's so important to have, as a trumpet player, a diverse variety of tone colors in your trumpet playing palette. I occasionally come across some. Honestly, they're usually band directors that are like, no, trumpet tone sounds like this and this only, and I must have this, and it must sound like this. Those people are wrong. Simple as that. There's so many ways to sound beautiful on an instrument. And not just, your signature tone for you as a trumpet player, but also, can you create a diverse palette of tonal colors with your instrument? That's something I'm always striving for, is can I sound a little darker if I want to, a little bit brighter if I want to, a little more piercing if I want to, a little bit more mellow if I want to. And so there's a lot of ways to work on this. So here are some ways to work on tone. So first, I guess what I'm saying is the first important thing is to have a concept in your mind. Have a concept of what is it that I want to sound like? Because if you don't have something that you're striving for, we're never going to know if we achieve it. So having that concept is super important. So here are some ways to work on your tone as a trumpet player. First of all, breathing. I think band directors, whether you're in middle school or a professional trumpet player, you probably all have spent some time doing some breathing exercises. But the breath is the beginning of everything for any wind instrument. So some breathing exercises are super important. If you'll indulge me, we can do a real quick breathing exercise right now. This is something that I like to do to get warmed up. I use a metronome for almost everything. So I'm going to put a metronome on right now. And I don't know if you can hear this, but I'm going to invite you to breathe along with me. All right. What we're going to do, I usually put it on something kind of mid-range. This is 72. And let's just sort of internalize that pulse for a moment. And what we're going to do is we're going to think in counts of 4. I want you to empty your lungs all the way. And we're just going to breathe in for 4 and then out for 4. And we're going to try to have it be a pretty smooth cyclical process so that there's not like a huge hitch in the giddy up at the top of our inhale or at the bottom of our exhale. All right? But we are going to try to empty our lungs completely after the exhale and fill our lungs completely at the top of the inhale. All right? So I'm going to count down 4, 3, 2, 1. And at that point, I want your lungs to be empty, and then we're going to breathe in. 3, 2, 1. Breathe in. Out. In. Out. One more time. In. Out. And then we pause and we do what's called a cleansing breath. Just like one of those like sighs of relief. If you've ever done Pat Sheridan or Sam Palafian's breathing gym exercises, they always do this cleansing breath. And I've started incorporating that in some breathing exercise, and I find it very helpful. All right, we're going to keep the metronome on. We're going to keep our total of 8 counts, but now we're going to switch so it's 2 counts in, 8 counts out. So our inhale will be a little bit faster and our exhale will be a little bit slower. All right, again, we're going to empty our lungs in 3, 2, 1. Breathe in, out. Breathe in, out. One more time. Breathe in, out. Cleansing breath, sigh of relief. All right. And then we would continue that process. Let's keep rolling with it. We're going to breathe in for 1 and out for 7. So a very quick breath in and a very slow breath out. This is the most similar to what it feels like to actually play the trumpet, right? Because we don't sit there when we're about to play and go, no, we take a nice quick breath in. So this is probably the most similar to what it feels like to play the trumpet. So our metronome's on again. Are emptying our lungs in 3, 2, 1. Breathe in. And cleansing breath. If you feel a little lightheaded right now, it's okay. It means you're absolutely doing this right. But have some water handy, and just be ready to feel a little bit lightheaded sometimes. Important to mention when you are breathing, one of the key things for any instrument is posture and as little tension as possible. Sometimes when I see students doing breathing exercises and they do these big breaths in, the shoulders go up and all the muscles in their neck get really tense, and we want to try to avoid that. This is a very loose and free concept. All right, the next element of practicing tone is singing, vocalizing. So again, you have that concept. We talked about the importance of having the concept in your mind. You have the concept in your inner ear. Can you now vocalize it? Can you phrase with your voice how you want it to sound? Um, I'm going to skip ahead. I'm not going to demonstrate every single one of these bullet points. We'd be here all night. But that's the process goes from the internal concept that you have to becoming an external concept where can you vocalize it. And then sort of the next step from there, probably everybody's familiar with some mouthpiece buzzing. Maybe you only mouthpiece buzz, like you have one exercise that you normally do, something out of the Schlossberg book or whatever. But I love using the mouthpiece all the time. Like I love playing phrases on it. It's a much freer, it kind of sounds like a kazoo. But if you can get a beautiful tone on the mouthpiece, it's much easier to get a beautiful tone on the trumpet. This is a resonance chamber is what this instrument is. This is an amplifier. This is like 90% of your tone right here. So if you can get a beautiful tone on this mouthpiece, meaning that concept that you had in your mind that you have vocalized with your voice, if you can get something really beautiful on your mouthpiece, it's going to translate into a really resonant, beautiful singing tone on your mouthpiece. Has anybody ever just buzzed on the lead pipe? This is like kind of a nice transition between the mouthpiece buzzing and playing the instrument. But I'll just demonstrate this very quickly. I wasn't planning on doing it, but we're going to roll with it. So if you just take your tuning slide out, and I invite you to do this with me, and then you're just playing through the lead pipe of the instrument, it gives a little bit more resistance than just playing the mouthpiece, but it still requires you to put in the effort to find the pitch on your own, which is really important on the trumpet. The trumpet can be forgiving in some ways, like there's slots for notes, but having a really beautiful tone requires you to be in what I'm going to talk about later, and that's the sweet spot of the notes of each slot. So if we take our tuning slide out, there's 3 fundamental slots on just your lead pipe. One is a concert E flat or a F on the B flat trumpet, and then a ninth above that, a concert F, or a G above the staff on a B flat trumpet, and then a fifth above that, a concert C, or a high D on a B flat trumpet. Um, so if you want to try this along with me, stay muted. But if you want to play with me, I'll just sort of show you what it sounds like. So here's the E flat, concert E flat. I'll just use trumpet notes. Here's our F on the trumpet. And then the ninth above that. That's our G above the staff on the trumpet, and then a high D on the trumpet, a fifth above that. And so you can actually practice some flexibility going back and forth between these. And one of the things that I like about this is there's, like I said, there's those slots there, but it still requires a lot more than just what the trumpet's going to give you. If you'll notice, if I take that bottom tone, there's a lot of other like wiggle room in there. You know, so you still have to. It still requires like more effort. But anyway, I recommend some lead pipe buzzing if that's something that you're not used to doing. It's a really great transition from the mouthpiece into the trumpet. Okay, I'm looking at the time here, and we better like get rolling here. Long tones, that's probably something that most people are familiar with. There's a lot of ways to play long tones. There's a lot of great resources, method books that have long tones as the beginning of it. Arbin starts that way. Schlossberg starts that way. And it's not really so much what the exact exercise is with the long tones. It's how focused are you on maintaining resonance and centering your tone into the sweet spot. That's important, whatever the long tone exercise that you're doing. So I'm going to skip over that one, and we're going to get to lip bends. Lip bends are something that I really like to practice. They help me center my tone a lot. So if you're unfamiliar with what a lip bend is, it's basically playing slurs, but with your lips instead of your fingers. So I'll do an exercise. Here's an example of an exercise from a book called Flexus that I like to play. And it goes like this. So you'll notice what I'm doing is I'm just slurring down a half step. I'm using the valves the first time and then trying to imitate that same sound, but bending my lips to alter the pitch. And what this does is, as on my way back up, if I wasn't totally centered before, it's kind of like the way string players tune their instruments. You know, they'll kind of like go way down and then you just sort of find where that tone really resonates. And doing lip bends is really helpful for that. And then again, with the concept I mentioned before about contextualizing the skill. Okay, now play some lyrical melodies. It's one thing to isolate these skills and, you know, just work on lip bends and a tone on a single note, but can you replicate that concept, that beautiful resonant tone in the context of a melody? So something really simple, something really lyrical, a ballad, a vocalese, something like that. And can you play this melody now from that performer's mindset, but all the notes, you know, resonating and singing in the sweet spot at the center? All right, flexibility. This is something that I consider one of the most I don't want to say difficult aspects of playing the trumpet, but a better word escapes me. So I'm going to say most difficult aspect of playing the trumpet. This right here is made out of the same stuff that like our toilets are made out of. It's plumbing. It's just brass tubing. For some reason, we've decided to like take this metal tubing and like buzz into this thing and decide like this is how we want to make beautiful music. So it's very difficult sometimes, and it doesn't always come naturally. But the thing is, nobody cares. Your audience doesn't care how difficult it is. Your teacher doesn't care how difficult it is. Like, nobody cares. The end result, that we make beautiful music, that's what matters. And so working on flexibility is something that I need to do every day, probably a little bit more than the other areas of technique. Sarah, could we skip to the next slide? We're gonna come back to this one for a second, but I want to talk about this slide for a second. Okay. Are you surprised that I went to music school instead of art school, everyone? This is my beautiful diagram that I created here. But this is like how I envision a tone, like a sound, okay? Pitch, yes, playing in the center of the pitch is something that I think most people can understand. Yes, I'm in the center of the pitch. That's where I want to be. The thing that I don't think most people even think about is time, your sense of pulse, and how that relates to how flexible you can be on the instrument. Even if we're not playing anything metered at all, if you're going from one note to another note, you have to have a sense of time for when that one note ends and the next note begins. So even if I'm playing something super rubato, I have to have some kind of rhythmic concept in my head, even if nobody else hears that rhythmic concept, about how that note ends and the next one begins. And it's so important for that reason to have a sense of time, as it relates to your ability to play with a nice, sweet, resonant tone, and be flexible, meaning, I can navigate, from the low range to the high range of the instrument and back down again. So I imagine this kind of, it's like a scope that you're looking through, and that perfect intersection between the center of the pitch and perfect time is right where we want to be. So one thing I like to think about is, as I'm going from one note to the next. Well, that was a horrible demonstration. I'm going to try it again. Okay, that was better. Is like, there's no time there. I'm just playing one long tone and then another long tone. But in my mind, I'm hearing a subdivision, and I'm kind of imagining, especially since there are so many band directors here, if you're a band director and you're conducting, what do you do? There's a fermata, right? You're just sort of holding the fermata, but then how do you let the band know when to play the next note? You don't just like expect them to play at your next movement, right? You have to hear in your head what the tempo is of the next thing that happens, and then you prep, and then you give them that. So that's kind of what we do, and it relates to flexibility on the trumpet. So as I'm playing one note, I'm giving myself like this little imaginary prep beat or subdivision in my head. Da 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 dee. And that's how I'm hearing, how to change from one note. Oh, and that brings me to telegraphing. Because when trumpet players don't do this, it tends to, I hear a lot of what I call telegraphing. Okay, and that means you're sort of projecting the change of pitch before it's actually time to change pitch. And so even if, you're not changing, like jumping from one partial to the next or one note to the next, the tone color gets uncentered and a little fuzzy, and there's a little bit of lack of clarity, and then the next note comes. And I find that when students or trumpet players at all complain about, like, I'm cracking too many notes, I'm missing notes, you get all these, we call them splias, splia, like that kind of a sound. It's usually related to time more than pitch. It's because you don't know when you're changing the note. So I'm going to invite you to play a little bit of an irons exercise with me. All right, I'm going to put my metronome back on. And I'm actually going to put, I like to use subdivisions sometimes. So I'm going to put my 16th note subdivision on. All right. And if you don't know this irons exercise, I'm just going to go back and forth between a C and an E, two open notes, lip slurs. And we're going to do quarter notes. And then we're going to do eighth notes. And then we're going to do triplets. And then we're going to do 16th notes. And for each of those, it's getting increasingly faster, but I'm thinking subdivision, and I'm focused on this, maintaining that sweet spot for my flexibility. All right, I'll demonstrate. If you know the exercise, please feel free to play along with me. 1, 2, 3. And that exercise you can continue. You just go down by half steps and do the same thing. So that's a great example of a great flexibility exercise that I like to do. Splia. Yeah, it's an official term. I coined it. Put it in the dictionary. It'll be the Webster's Word of the Year next year. Okay, and clarity before speed. You're going to see that a lot. We better move on for time. Let's flash forward a couple of slides. Okay, finger dexterity. All right, we've talked a lot about our breath and our focus on our embouchure and things that happen here, but we get to use these too when we play trumpet. We're not just like buglers playing natural trumpets from back in the day. We get valves and stuff. So having proper hand position, but I usually tell students to like imagine you're holding a tennis ball or something like that, and it's important not to have like a tense claw like this, but just, kind of the way if you're just casually holding a ball. Or sometimes I'll say put your hand on your knee and then just, pick it up without having to like really move your fingers at all, and then just place them on the valves. It is important to have your fingertips pushing straight down. I will admit this is a bad habit of mine. I do this a lot. Every trumpet player, all the greatest musicians in the world, everybody's got some bad habits. Do as I say, not as I do. But when I catch myself, I fix it. That's the important thing. The importance of pushing straight down versus sideways. If you can imagine what this piston valve is doing, right? It's encapsulated inside this cylinder, and that valve is moving up or down and back up again. If you're pushing sideways, if you have poor hand position and you're constantly pushing that valve a little bit sideways as it goes down, it will go down. But the more it does that, the more that valve is getting pushed to one side and then back again. And it's going to get possibly bent or dented, but more likely just out of alignment. And that's when your valves start to stick, and it's not just I need some valve oil or something like that. So it is important to push those valves straight down. All right, I wrote on here the third finger, because this is something that I don't think we think about enough. We're just like, I got to do finger exercises. I got to practice my Clark technical studies. I got to practice my chromatic scales. I got to whatever. That is my email, yes. But the third, if you take, this is when it comes to trumpet, in case you don't know, our index finger is always the first finger, middle finger is the second finger, and our ring finger is the third finger. So everybody just take your first finger and just kind of tap it on your thumb like this. And then tap your middle finger, your second finger, and tap it on your thumb, and now your third finger. Which of those three is the weakest or the hardest to do? It's 100% of you, it's your third finger, right? I mean, absolutely. That finger shares a tendon with another finger. It's always the third finger. So I think it's important to work that third finger a little bit more than the other two. The other two just get much more use throughout other daily activities and skills. So that third finger, I'm going to show you an exercise, but this stays here in this room. I want to make a lot of money on this exercise someday. So nobody run away and publish this. If you do, Sarah will tell me and we will find you. And I'll be very upset is what's going to happen. I don't know yet. But this is an exercise. If you take a pentatonic scale, and if you're in like middle school right now and you don't know what a pentatonic scale is, I'm sorry. You don't need to know yet. But if you take a pentatonic scale, and if you start on an open note, like a low C on the trumpet, the way the alternate fingerings work on the trumpet, these are not the primary fingerings, these are alternate fingerings. But if you just go down, is everybody familiar with the like 7 valve combinations? Open, 2, 1, 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 1 and 3, 1, 2 and 3. Those 7 combinations, you start on any open note and go down those 7 positions, you'll go down chromatically. So if you just go down those 7 positions and wiggle your finger, wiggle your third finger, it will create a pentatonic scale. So here's an exercise that I'm going to show you. And it doesn't leave this room. You can practice it on your own, but you can't let anybody hear you practicing it. All right, so it goes like this. Sorry. If I had more time, I would show you. I would actually go back up, and I would spend a little bit more time doing that. But already, I'm starting to feel the burn a little bit, like all the way down my forearm. But that's a great exercise to just kind of work that third finger, and I have found it very helpful. One of the reasons we think of certain key signatures as being like difficult, I really try very hard to not think of playing something in D flat or whatever as like a difficult key. It just means there's more accidentals, or there's more sharps or flats. But what it means on the trumpet, it means there's a lot more third finger. It's not just like open and first finger, like the quote easy keys. There's just a lot more like second and third, 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 3 kind of finger combinations, and we're just less used to using that third finger. So I think it needs to be practiced more often than not. And again, clarity before speed. Don't speed up that exercise until you can play all of those notes in a nice resonant tone, and then you work on the speed afterwards. All right, articulation. Articulation, of course, is mostly we think of the attack, the beginning of the sound. I wrote on here the spectrum. I think it's important to realize that articulation is a vast spectrum. Sometimes we get caught up in thinking that like staccato is like a singular thing and legato is just a thing. But within the realm of staccato or legato or marcato, or jazz musicians like doodle tonguing, there's like a whole world of like different ways you can play staccato. How short, how sharp, how pointed, how rounded, how dark, how bright. There's so many different ways to think about the attack. So just like we were talking about with tone, it's really important to have a concept. And then there's the end of the note that we don't always think about. But that's part of the articulation as well. Is this one of those things where I want to release the sound into the room? Da. Or is this like I want a hard stop with my tongue? Da. Most classical conductors are cringing right now, but it's very common in a lot of other styles of music to have that. But just like we were talking about with our third finger being the less used finger of the three that we use to play the trumpet, when it comes to multiple tonguing, so like double tonguing or triple tonguing, and using the T, the tip of our tongue, and then the K part of our tongue, the back of our tongue, again, which part of the tongue has less experience getting used? The K, you've played a million notes in your life with the T part of your tongue, and way fewer with the K part of your tongue. So I think it's important to practice with just the K syllable. Here's an exercise that I like to do. I do this before I really practice double tonguing at speed. I will just practice. My goal is to get the T and the K to sound identical, so that somebody listening to me does not know if I'm articulating with the K part of my tongue or the T part of my tongue. So I'll do some like page 175 out of the Arbin's book, which is where the double tonguing section starts, and I'll do something like this. I'm going to show you if I point forward, that means it's a T tongue, and if I point backwards, that means it's a K tongue, and then this will be double tonguing. So I'll do an exercise like this. And then I'll go up the scale. And my goal is to just really have them sound identical. but and then I'll start working on double tonguing at speed. But K tonguing practice is really important, and you can take anything. You can take a scale, coo 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 coo. You can take a Clark study like Clark number two, coo 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 coo, and just practice with the K part of your tongue, because it needs the reps. It gets way less experience than the T part of your tongue. And oh my God, what do we have here again? Clarity before speed. Get a nice, clear, good sounding K tongue before you even think about trying to play fast. Um, because all speed does, if we don't have it slow, we don't have it. So all speed does is mask problems. All right. So playing with expression. I'll kind of wrap this up here, and then if there are questions, we can take them, or I can also maybe just run through some of the other slides that I have, but leave it up to you guys. Um, Listening, hugely important. It's important, again, going back to the beginning, to develop our concept of sound, um, but also our concept of phrasing. What, how do I want to deliver something? And I think it's important to try something different ways. I talk with my students a lot about being an actor. We're actors as musicians. We're playing characters. Um, this one phrase here might be like a little bouncy and a little tongue in cheek and silly, and then the next phrase might be kind of dark and foreboding. And like we have to convey these different colors and textures and timbres and characters. That's what makes music interesting and fun. Um, but how do we do it? Well, we have to have that concept. We have to have a way of developing this concept, and that starts with listening. So, what to listen to? That's a question I get a lot. What do you like? Start with things that you like. It doesn't matter if it's like a trumpet player or a violinist or a singer. I listen to so many singers. I probably try to imitate singers more with my trumpet than I do other trumpet players. Um, and my trumpet students at Vandercook are all learning like the singers. I use like Sarah, Bryn Terfel, like that's a singer I use a lot. Like there's if it's a trumpet thing and it's like a big like orchestral trumpet thing, I he's a singer that I really like, a baritone singer that I try to emulate that sort of dark, like really full sound that he has, and I just really like the way that he phrases things. Um, but again, seeing the forest through the trees, this is, all the granular stuff that we work on when we're in our practice mindset. Um, the muscle memory of that transfers. And now it's time to just focus on phrasing. And, if you've been putting in the time with your flexibility work and your tone work and your articulation and fingers, etc., um, it's there. It's kind of like, do you think about what you're doing when you like take a, I don't know, like take a step? Like you don't usually think about putting one foot in front of the other because you've done it a million times. Do you think about like putting a spoon into your mouth? Like no, it's on autopilot. It's muscle memory. And so the more you practice these granular things and do them correctly, now you can turn that part of your brain off and focus on the phrasing and focus how you want to express something, and the muscle memory is there. Improvisation, uh, I'll leave us with this. I think is extremely important to practice for everyone, not just jazz musicians. Improvisation does not mean, that's one way of improvising, but there's a freedom and a way that our brain changes a little bit when we are improvising. Um, we're not focused on, it's like the difference between trying to not mess up or trying to do something. Trying to do something versus trying to not do something is a really critical distinction. And when you're improvising, it's very free. There's no messing up. And so if you can take away those rules, some of that can transfer to playing, written music. There's no messing up. I mean, sure there is, but mistakes are 100% in the past. They're in the rearview mirror. They don't exist. You're still in character. If I'm an actor on stage and I stutter a little bit, I don't stop and say, "Sorry, audience, I stuttered. Let me say that word again." That's not what it's about. You stay in character. You stay committed to the expressive phrase that you're trying to convey. And I think improvising something is a really great way of practicing that. Whether you have any intention of like improvising a solo in public or something or not. Just practicing that process, I think, is really beneficial. And you can start by something really simple. If improvising terrifies you, and I hate that it terrifies so many people, but I know that it does. And it didn't used to. When you were children, when you were very young children, you used to improvise the hell out of everything every day, all the time, and it was wonderful. And somewhere along the way, society taught you to be fearful of improvising. So try to find that childlike wonder again. And if it does terrify and you're like, I don't even know where to start. I'm just catatonic here. Just take like, okay, I'm gonna practice a scale anyway. Take your scale and just kind of practice, going up and down that scale, change the, duration and, the order in which you play the notes, and just kind of go up and down, and then see if it created something that resonated with you. And then, just kind of build from there. Start with something familiar to you, and then push the boundaries a little bit to something that's a little bit less familiar. And that's how improvisation can blossom and help your expressive playing.
Looks like we have a question about the best way to convince young players to not puff their cheeks.
Um, yeah, puffing your cheeks is not desirable, I would say. Um, that said, there have been great players that do puff their cheeks. So I think like the most important thing is that I think it's very important for students to realize there's no like one right way or one wrong way to play. But when you puff your cheeks, there's air in between. There's now air in between your lip and your gums, and that creates a very unstable surface for your embouchure. You know, um, it's like if you were trying to like practice a really intricate dance routine, and like the surface that you're dancing on is like a bouncy house. Like you can't do that. So what I always say is, the three parts of establishing your embouchure is first, say like you just ate a really good bowl of soup or something, and then make sure your lips roll in. All right, I talk about the two different types of skin. There's like your lip skin and your face skin. I do not think these are medical terms, but I don't know what the medical terms are. But you all know what I'm talking about. So the lip skin needs to get rolled in, and the mouthpiece should be on your face skin. About 50-50, but that's just a guess. Everybody's face and teeth and skulls are a little bit different. And then the next part is taking these corners of your mouth, and I picture like just trying to like push them down like this. And keeping these corners really tight. This is when you say build endurance, build strength, what we're talking about is these corners of your mouth right here. This is what you have to build strength in. And the reason that the cheeks are puffing is because these are not strong yet. And this becomes unstable. And two things happen when these are not strong enough. The cheeks get puffed, or people smile. And smiling is wonderful all times except when you're playing trumpet, because it thins your lips. And you don't want a piece of metal in your teeth, which is the hardest bone in your body, your little thin lips sandwiched in between those two things. Ouch. So I think it's really, if you can like work on getting those corners cranked down, and then you have a nice solid stable surface right here to build your embouchure from.
How to address tight sounding players, maybe the lips are too close together, and how to address it correctly, please.
Okay, yeah. So sometimes our lips can be a little too tight. When practicing flexibility, I think that just goes to flexibility. What flexibility means to me is how smoothly can you transition between, it's not like just tight or loose. It's a whole, it's constantly changing, right? So, how can I get from super low notes in the low register of the horn? My lips are a little bit looser. They need room to vibrate wider. The horn is pulled away from my face a little bit more. And then when I play, super high notes, they're a little bit tighter. Maybe my bell is angled a little bit differently. And so it can start by just, kind of some of those really simple flexibility exercises that we did a few moments ago. But just playing with that, the wider intervals that you practice, that's what's happening. You're constantly sort of like playing with the tension and the tightness of the lips. One thing that I do find that is helpful with students sometimes is, and I have to be careful to overemphasize that these are like very microscopic movements. Don't overdo this, but is changing the angle of your bell. So for higher notes, like a little bit more downstream, and for lower notes, a little bit more upstream. Again, super microscopic. I'm way over exaggerating just to demonstrate. Um, but understanding that you have to be able to play. If players are, they have to kind of like reset their embouchure to play low notes and then reset again to play high notes. Then they're not working on flexibility, because the horn exists. It kind of moves around a little bit.
I'm seeing a question. How can I encourage other trumpet players to take improv solos or just solos, specifically in jazz?
Um, if the issue is confidence, sometimes it is. There's, I would say, case by case basis on how to deal with that. But building a atmosphere of trust and safeness, and just kind of like not going too big too fast. Like if you've never improvised anything, and then you're saying, can you take a solo, like a 12 bar solo, like, oh my god, what? But start by like include it in your warm-ups, maybe like, hey, we're all gonna like just go around the room and we're gonna take these three notes, and you have these three notes, and I'm gonna play ba ba da da da, and then you come up with something da 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 da, something like that, and just kind of get people comfortable, like, oh, this is just a thing we do in our warm-ups, and then kind of gradually work towards creating something a little bit more significant or robust out of it. But that I've had some success with doing it that way.
Someone has asked how to play higher notes with good tone. Do you have any tips for that, please?
Okay. So this is one of the things that I skipped over when I kind of went over time with the notes. But I mentioned earlier how I don't consider range, like high range, to be an element of technique. Um, but I do consider flexibility to be an element of technique, obviously. So wherever the top of your range is, you've already increased your range. Like, whenever the first day you played trumpet, you probably played two notes or something like that, and now you can play, whatever level you're at. You can play two octaves, or you can play one octave, whatever. Um, so you have constantly worked on expanding your range already, and you didn't do it by trying to play higher. If you focus on trying to play higher, or that's your goal, is try to expand my range, chances are you're going to develop bad habits. You're going to get too tight, you're going to press too hard, and you're going to do things that are counterintuitive to what you need to be doing to be able to play in the upper register. So what I ask my students to do is to take the whatever the top few notes of their range are currently, and just focus on getting really beautiful tones on those notes. So if you can play a beautiful melody like this in the lower register, okay, can you now try that an octave up? And just focus on getting a really beautiful tone in this kind of like mid-level, like sort of high register. And if you normally can play scales or Clark studies, or whatever exercise in like a lower register, transpose it up a fourth or up a fifth, or just up a few notes, and get comfortable playing really focused, centered, all of the other elements of technique that we talked about, in a place that's not where you consider your middle of your range to be, but a place that's a little bit higher in your range. And guess what? It becomes the middle of your range. Like all of a sudden, new notes. It's like at a video game. Like you unlocked a new level. Like, oh God, there's like a few notes that I couldn't play before, and so now your high end of your range. These notes that were previously the top of your range are now sounding resonant and centered and beautiful. And now there's a few more notes up here that you've just added, and then you just repeat the process.
It's been asked if you have any tips to give your students adjusting to getting braces or getting braces removed. I think this is an issue that many people are currently working with.
I had braces, and I have had many students over the years with braces, and um, how well they adjust is kind of dependent on how you know if all those elements of technique and how flexible you are, and if you're really in tune to the stuff that we talked about, like analyzing and assessing, like am I centered, all this stuff, are my is my form good, is my embouchure good, and just like the more, just focus on the form, focus on the process, on like a ego level. Just like understand that you're gonna, if you had braces on and they come off, you are gonna take a few steps back because you're adjusting. You had like stuff in your mouth and now it's gone, so it's a bit of a process. I have a student right now that at Vandercook, a freshman, that had her braces off just before she got to Vandercook, and so she's still kind of dealing with it, but she's a phenomenal player. And celebrate the good things about it. I have a story. I had it wasn't braces, but I had my wisdom teeth taken out like right before I went to college, and I was so excited to like be a freshman in college, like music school. I was like, I'm gonna rock this. I'm gonna do this. And like I got there and I did my first seating audition. It was like I couldn't play anything. So I get it. It's a total adjustment. But yeah, it's kind of like just relearning how to do. It's like getting a cast off. It's like, okay, I got to relearn how to ride a bike a little bit, but just focus on form. Know that you're going to take a few steps back, but in so doing, you're going to like re-solidify proper technique, and you will exponentially improve in time.
Well, thank you very much. Everyone, I have put Professor Madeja's email address in the chat in case you had another question or would like to talk about Vandercook or even set up a lesson. Please do feel free to reach out to me as well. I'll put my email in the chat as well. And at this point, everyone, we can absolutely adjourn. Thank you all so very much for joining us. Trumpet, Tone, and Technique.